Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I'm going to be sharing with you a really easy technique for creating watercolor backgrounds. Watercoloring is probably one of my least favorite mediums. Now, not to say that I don't love the results that I see on some of the beautiful cards out there that everybody shares. I just haven't seemed to be able to master that. And I have a feeling there's probably a few more people out there just like me. So I wanted to share with you today the way that I get around watercoloring. So whenever I'm challenged with creating a watercolor background, I always go to my Aqua Nuvo pens. And that's because it's really easy to get the exact amount of ink and water on your cardstock by using these pens. Now these pens come in a variety of colors, but today I'm using the color Spice Ginger along with Lemon Zest. And that's because I want to create just a really subtle background for the images that I'm going to be using today. So as you can see, the Aqua pens added just enough of the ink on the cardstock to create a really subtle background. And then after I was happy with the amount of ink that I had on my white cardstock, I did bring out my heating tool to go ahead and dry it. Now I could have easily air dried it, but I did want to go ahead and move forward with my card. Now the card background that you see on the top left side is one I was playing with earlier, and I was using some of the blue Aqua watercolor. And after I had finished, I had decided that that was just a little bit too dark. Now, even though that's a really cute background and it would work for probably some images that have a little bit more white in them, I decided to go with the yellow background because I wanted my images to stand out just a little bit more, and I didn't want my little dog to get lost in all that blue. Now the stamp set that I'm working with today is from the Stamp Doctor, and the set is called Doggone Dog Stamps. And I'm using not only the rubber stamps, but I'm also using the mini die cuts. It's a really cute little stamp set, and it's perfect for birthdays. A couple of the sentiments say, "Doggone it, what am I forgetting?" And the little dog is hitting his head with his paw. And then there's another sentiment that says, "I remember, you're another year older." And then the last sentiment is "Happy Rough Day." And that's the sentiment I'm going to be working with today. I had already stamped all of my images and colored them with my Copic crayons off camera because I wanted to really focus on the background and creating my little scene. Now, since I am creating a birthday card, I wanted to use some really nice vibrant colors. And I went ahead and I stuck with my primary colors using the yellow cardstock where I added my watercolor. And then I'm going to use this blue cardstock for the base. So using my guillotine trimmer, I went ahead and trimmed down my cardstock to 4 inches by 5 and 5.25. And that was a good size for an A2 card. I typically like to leave 1/4 of an inch when I'm cutting my cardstock because I think that's a really nice visual mat. So I had my blue cardstock, and then I also had my watercolor paper, and I went ahead and I adhered my white cardstock to the blue cardstock. Now I'll typically do this, especially when I know I'm going to be adding foam dots, because that does create a little bit more lift to the card, and it's always nice to have your base intact before you get started on your images. Now when you are creating a scene, keep in mind you don't necessarily always have to use the same thickness of your foam tape. So on this particular one, I used a thinner foam tape for my little doghouse because I knew I wanted some of the images to go on top of that, but not necessarily completely over, just partially over. So I needed my foam tape to be a little bit taller than the very first image. So if you are going to work with different sizes of foam tape, you want to make sure that you start out with the foam tape that is the thinnest first for your base, and then kind of work from there. I've worked with layered cards before, and you've seen some of my videos in the past where I add layers, and you just want to kind of think that out before you start adding your layers. Again, especially if you're going to be using different sizes of your foam tape. Now, when I'm putting together a scene, and I know I'm going to be using a sentiment, I try to figure out exactly where I might want my sentiment first, because I don't want to adhere my images before I get that sentiment in place. So with this particular one, because that little dog was pointing, I wanted him to be pointing to my sentiment, and so that's where I decided to position my little stamp. And then from there I could figure out where my images were going to go. So I did use my stamping platform to go ahead and get my sentiments stamped. And again, whenever I am creating a background and I am using a sentiment stamp, I want to make sure that I get a nice crisp stamp, because if I don't get a nice crisp stamp the very first time, then my background is pretty much shot. So I don't want to have to take the chance of ruining my background. So I'll always go to my stamping platform on something like that. And then from there, I can go ahead and start to put together my little scene. Now, like I said, I knew that my little dog house was going to be some foam tape that was a little bit thinner. So I went ahead and I placed that first. And then I went ahead and I started working with some of the other images. Now, one thing to keep in mind if you are working with little images like a person or a little dog, you don't necessarily want him to look like he's kind of floating in the air. So it's always a good idea to create some grounding, and you can do this easily by just creating a couple of lines. But in this case, I did want to go ahead and use some of those Aqua Flow pens. So I just took my ink and I just created some lines, and then I'm going to take some of my my cloth, just my scrap cloth, and just kind of smear it around. Now, I wasn't really concerned about the way that it was going to look, because again, this is just kind of a piece of ink to ground my image. So I was okay with it being a little bit rough because my little dog is going to go right over that. So once I got the excess water off, I went ahead and I used my heating tool to finish drying it, and then I was ready to place my image. I kind of like the randomness of that ink spot because it doesn't look like too much effort was put into it. It just looks like it's just a piece of grass where the dog is standing on. And that's really what I was going for. I didn't want it to look too precise. So just adding a little bit of the colored and using my cloth to kind of dab it up was a perfect way to create that grounding element. And then I was able to continue on adding my foam adhesive to the back of my images and placing my images on my cardstock. Now, as one of the members of the design team for the Stamp Doctor, I am able to offer you a discount on their product in their shop. So if you use the code TailorMadeCards4You, you are able to get 10% off. And I'll make sure that I leave that in the description below. So be sure to check out the store because they have a lot of really cute images along with the matching die cuts. They have some really great Easter sentiments as well out there. So go ahead and just take a look at the shop. And don't forget, you can use the coupon code TailorMadeCards4You. So at this point, I went ahead and I took my ATG gun and I adhered the card top to the base of my card. And then I wanted to add just a few more elements to give it a little bit more interest. So I went to my black Nuvo drops and I just added a few drops here and there. So as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the card along with the links to the stores. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up. And feel free to leave me a comment as well. You know, I always love reading your comments. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. And click that little bell so that way you're notified when I do publish a new video. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.